Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Swiss Cyber Expo. I'm Riley Hill, the Marketing and Events Manager, and would like to thank you all for joining us here. The topic of today's keynote presentations is security and humans. At the end of the session, we will offer a Q&A where you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions. And now I would like to hand over to Samir Liev, the founder and CEO of Swiss Cyber Forum. He will give you a quick overview and introduce the guest speaker of today's session on security and humans and how to tame this wicked problem.
Thank you very much, Riley, and thank you very much for the introduction. First of all, I would like to welcome Tom Hofmann and our attendees and the live attendees on the Swiss Cyber Expo platform. Before we start the presentation, I would like to say something about Tom Hofmann. Tom is a professional cybersecurity and privacy expert in Switzerland, and Tom has recently been assigned as a position CISO, and he has over 20 years of security expertise from projects all around the globe with scientific knowledge and principles to support people and organizations toward an innovative cyber security. So in this keynote presentation, Tom has prepared an excellent presentation for you, and Tom will discuss human-centric security, how this concept is different from the traditional model of security. Therefore, I would like to invite you to be active, to join us during the presentation. Send us your question. I will read your question to Tom later on your Cyber Expo platform. You have a Q&A session. Please submit your question there. I will read them later on after the presentation of Tom. Tom, welcome to our expo, and it's our pleasure to host you. And I'm super excited to see your excellent presentation during the next 50 minutes.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you, Samir. Nice to be here. Hello, everyone. Good morning. So yeah, today is about humans and security. It will be quite a roller coaster from scientific and technology bits and pieces, and yeah, it's not meant to be a sufficient deep dive into the whole scientific background. I just want to give you something to think about and a new perspective on the topic that we're seeing today. So, brief introduction. Unfortunately, I'm still online. I rather prefer physical meetings, but yeah, it's still not quite possible. So a brief intro of myself, additional to what Samir already mentioned. Right now, I am a Chief Information Security Officer for a power and utilities company here in Switzerland. I'm also the Data Protection Officer, and I spent the last 20 years in the industry doing projects in Japan, China, up to the Polar Circle in Finland. And the last couple of years, I also ventured into the whole realm of science. So I got really interested in social science and the social topics behind management, innovation, leadership, and how this affects security as we see it today. This will, as I said, this will be a first intro. It will be quite different to, I would say, to what we see today in the industry. And the idea is also to, yeah, give you some information to start your own journey on this whole topic. I'm also an active lecturer at the Fachhochschule Nordwestschweiz, the University of Applied Science in Northwest Switzerland, where I'm also lecturing on these topics. And I'm also a master's student right now, where I'm conducting my own research on this whole topic. So with that, let's dive right into the whole topic. Where are we today? Today's attacks are large-scale, multi-vector mega attacks using advanced tools. This sounds super fancy. I took that from a security vendor who describes this as Generation 5 attacks. Obviously, you always need something new to sell. We now have Generation 6 attacks, which are even more advanced and even more serious and even more complicated. So yeah, I think you all know these marketing sales terms and how this evolves. So the question is, what are we doing about it today? Today, we really get the security through technology, just like this astronaut here in space. We really try to get security through technical measures and controls.
Tom,
So
excuse me, we don't see your presentation.
Oh, sorry about that. You see, that's why I just shared the screen and I just share it again. So unfortunately,
You can share it again.
Yes, so apparently the good, let's see, there we go. Zoom didn't like me this morning. All right. So I hope you can see it now again.
Yes, we see it right now.
Perfect. So as I said, we have these large-scale multi-vector mega attacks, and what we are doing about it is actually, first of all, security through technology. This means we're shaping our organization through hardware, software. If we look at the recent Gartner stuff, we have things like cybersecurity mesh, zero trust, identity first, like all these fancy buzzwords that we are supposed to implement. But let's look at reality. I mean, let's face it. Just recently, some of you might heard about it. There was an attack on a water treatment plant in Florida, and the attacker tried to poison the water through manipulation of the industrial control system to make it some sort of a caustic cocktail. Yeah, how advanced was this attack on a very critical infrastructure? I mean, we're talking about drinking water here. Well, yeah, all computers shared the same password for remote access, and they all appear to be directly connected to the internet. Plus, they had no type of firewall protection installed. Not that advanced of an attack, nor the defense. The other example, the Colonial Pipeline hack we just faced recently. So we have seen this ransomware at DarkSide attacking Colonial Pipeline, the billing system, and this led to a shutdown of almost 9,000 kilometers of the pipeline, and they paid about $4.5 million in ransom. The US law enforcement now was able to recover most of it, but it was quite a hard shock because all of the East Coast actually was without any oil. It was a large hoarding at the gas stations. So this really had a massive impact. Also because the attack was on the billing system, actually, the IT, but the effect also transferred over to the operational side because they were no longer able to identify how much oil is delivered, what they should bill, etc. So they really had to shut down everything. And just look at this, how this advanced attack worked out. Well, they had a dormant VPN account. The Colonial employee reused the password, which got compromised and leaked on the darknet. And there was no multi-factor authentication on internet-facing endpoints enabled. So again, this was not super sophisticated. This was very, very basic stuff. I mean, just think about this 500 million records that leaked for Facebook. I mean, all this information can be used for spear phishing, for social engineering attacks. This is quite obvious. So if technology doesn't work, what are we going to do about it then? Well, we do security through governance. So we had the technology part, but now obviously all of you know, we just add some governance to it. We have the ISO 27K standard. We have PCI DSS in the payment industry. We have the NIST cybersecurity framework. We have the standard publication 853. We have the HIPAA and the healthcare. We have GDPR. So we have a bunch of frameworks, legal regulations that tell us like how to operate our organization and how to do things to avoid such attacks. One could now say, well, that didn't work out quite well so far. But maybe it was these organizations who simply ignored all the governance. Let's have a look at the very stringent organization, the US military. 2 weeks ago, it became known that the US military exposed nuclear weapon secrets via flashcard apps. Flashcard apps are these learning apps where you can have like digital cards where you write down a question and an answer. So some of you might know the analog version back from school. And they use that to actually train their people, and they have been out on the internet publicly available. And these information revealed, for example, the position of cameras on site, the frequency of patrols around the vaults where the nuclear bombs have been stored or still stored. And they also had the secret Juris words that signal when a guard is being threatened, and the unique identifiers that a restricted area badge needs to have. And just remember, we are talking about one of the highest trained and highest budget military in the world, and about nuclear weapons. And so we still have these type of leaks and information. So if we look at these two mechanisms we are seeing today, technology and governance, we are really focused on these two aspects. However, we neglect the adaptability and the innovativeness of the people inside our organization to attain their goals. Just think about it, the US military, they just needed an easy way to train their people. And well, these flashcard apps have been out there. So they became quite innovative and simply used it to get to their goals. So what we see today on the left hand, we have the people in our organization. We also have these people in a structure. You have a boss, you have a sales manager. And right now, we are really having this like right-hand focus technology and tasks pushing over, being enforced onto our organization, onto the people. Like, this is how you have to work. This is what you have to do, mainly driven by the technology. But we completely forget that technology today is ubiquitous, that people, if this doesn't work, they do their own they do their own technology. They do this shadow IT topic, which we have seen over many, many years. So how can we get the humans into the picture? And this is the first intro to human-centered security. And I just dug a little bit through what we see human-centered security today. Today we say, well, I have a few quotes here. It starts by training people on critical thinking, time management, ongoing awareness, vulnerable points of entry, etc. Or about the education and empowerment of employees to understand risk and make better decisions. And the final one of the biggest challenges and weakest links we face are the people. Obviously, it is the people to blame. So in summary, this means people are a risk. They are the risk because they're not well educated and not aware. The question is this really true? Is that the problem, or is that the answer to human-centered security? Unfortunately, often this translates to something that's completely useless, stupid, and ignorant. And I'm pretty sad to still see this around. And up here on the left corner is Werner Vogel, the CTO of Amazon, who said a couple of years ago, there's always that idiot that will click the link. Well, seriously, if we talk to people like that, if we tell them you are an idiot, how do you think these people will participate in our security organization? And the same is true for the meme on the lower left corner, the human error, Dave. Seriously, they are not the error. What do you think, like, psychologically this means to people if you're always talking down on them? But yeah, let's assume this is true. Luckily, it's only these idiots. Well, obviously, highly trained and skilled Secret Service agents would be much better. Well, in 2019, they stopped an alleged Chinese spy at then President Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, and they had nothing better to do than take the USB stick, plug it into the Secret Service laptop, and all of a sudden they reported they were stunned to see that all of a sudden Chinese malware started to install. So yeah, even Secret Service agents are not capable to handle with the threats we're seeing today. Maybe the Swiss military. So we are in Switzerland, so I like a local example as well. We are very much known for being very stringent and very on point. Well, there was an audit, and it started very nicely, as all the audits does. We gained the impression that the Swiss military has a sufficient number and good quality of directives and guidelines describing how to securely use IT resources. And all employees were made aware of the correct use of IT by means of awareness campaigns. So everything we see today in the human-centered security space, or the so-called human-centered, has been done. What has been the result? Well, we should be safe, right? No. While they also found out that people used cloud services like Dropbox and local Swiss providers on simply iPads and their private devices, they also noticed there are several Wi-Fi access points who has been installed on the military training ground, and they don't know where they are. And the question where exactly these Wi-Fi devices are located and whether they are still connected to the network could not be clarified. So, I mean, just think about this. We've seen the US military exposing nuclear secrets. We've seen Secret Service agents plugging in malware from spies into their laptops. We've seen the Swiss military installing shadow IT. So they all had technology, they all had governance, they all had the training and the awareness. We really have to rethink, and if we summarize human-centered security as we approach it today, we can say it assumes there is a known problem and a known fix. And these are very important points. We are very much engineering focused. This is a problem, there's a fix. There's a linear connection between both of them. And obviously, the security engineers know all about it. We know what technology we use. We know what to protect from. And by this, it is very, very clear. The problem is the people who don't want to comply with directives about how technology must be operated, right? I mean, it's them. We train them. Why don't they simply follow the roads? Well, this is a quote I've written myself, but it's not really from me. I would like to give you the original quotes, and then it also explains why these smiling guys are down there in the corner. The original quote says, the management insisted that the problem was that workers were not complying with directives about how the technology was to be operated. It sounds quite similar, but now this is a research that was performed in the year of 1949. This is really, really old, and they had the very exact same thing. I would like to give you a bit of an insight into this first scientific background, what they did back then. They found out, or let's put it like this, it was shortly after World War II. The UK really had to recover from all the damage through the war. So the main source of energy was coal. So they introduced new machines, new electrified machines to the miners, and they expected an increase in productivity and effectiveness. What they have seen was the complete opposite. They have seen a steep decline. They have seen people leaving the mines, calling in sick. So they have seen the complete opposite. And because coal was so important to the economy, they set off this task force of scientists, Eric Trist and Chris Bamford, to study this phenomena. And what they found out is like, well, we have all the technology and we have the management, and even back then they also had consultants. So we told the people like, this is the new tool and this is how you have to use it. Why are you still complaining and are not using as you have been told? The result is what they found out. Organizations and teams and even societies, if we talk about technology, it is about the joint optimization of social and technical systems in an organization. Well, what is a social system in that case? And this is quite important to note here. It's different from an IT system. Social scientists refer to a system, for example, to an organization. This is like a living being. This is like the interconnection between various individual parts, team members in that case. So organizations have on the one side a social system, which is comprised of the people in your organization, the structure in your organization, like who's your boss, the hierarchy. And on the other hand, we have the technical system. This comes from the ancient Greek word techne, and it's not only the technology itself as we know it today, but also defines the defined task, the governance, etc. So everything that is more, on the technical describing part of your organization. And they figured out it is not enough to simply look at the technical part and afterwards trying to adapt the social part to it. This does not work. What they found out is you have a fully interconnected mesh. The social aspects are just as important as the technical aspects. And you have to consider both when you design your organization. And you see, this is also how it translates to my role as a CISO. As a CISO, I can't afford it to just look at technology and say, well, I'm just rolling out an antivirus. I literally have to look at the social aspects of our organization. Because what they also found out is if you change the technical part and adapt the social system afterwards, what we are trying to do with awareness today, this has a negative impact. This does not work. So this is the first high-level intro to the topic of the so-called socio-technical system design theory from social science. And what we can make a conclusion out of this, human-centered design is not awareness training. Human-centered design is to design the system, the organization, collaboratively with the people, literally working together. Awareness training is about the education of the people on topics regarding the system. Both are important, but they're completely different in their intent. So people are always like, okay, Tom, just, yeah, I got it. So we somehow get these people into the picture. Tell us the magic formula. Do I need a new framework? Do I need to buy some new software? Yeah, you will be shocked. Villains hate this one simple trick. And some of you know this clickbait stuff, so you probably already can anticipate it is not that easy. And for this, I would like to come back to say, okay, we know now how the social and the technical aspects work together. But the result is something that we call wickedness. The problems that we have when we have to adapt social and technical things together, these are not linear problems. These are not problems that we can look at from an engineering perspective. These are so-called wicked problems. Wicked problems are kinds of problems that planners deal with, societal problems, and they are inherently different from the problems that scientists and perhaps classes of engineers deal with. This guy in the low right is Horst Rittel. He's a German, or he was a German researcher. And he looked at this whole wickedness of problems in the 60s. And he was the first to coin this term of wicked problems, to say, there are problems that you cannot address through engineering aspects. And because this sounds a little bit vague, I have an example for you to make a little bit the difference between other problems. So on the one hand, we have complicated problems. Complicated can be solved through science, through engineering. However, on the other hand, we have these complex, wicked problems. And the example I took is, why can we reach the moon, but not the airport? This is also an interesting quote from a researcher, and it really is a good picture to give people an understanding of the two problems we are facing today. Not only when we talk about security, but think about this COVID-19 app in the recent pandemic. We said, oh, we just need some more technology and then all the fancy problems go away. This is not true. This was also a socio-technical wicked problem, and technology was never a solution to it. Complicated problems. This is where we're very good at today. Complicated problems are problems like flying to the moon. It's not easy, but it can be done. We know there's chemistry, there's physics, there's math. I need to calculate all this. It's not easy. It can be done. It is a linear problem. But going to the airport and being stuck in a traffic jam, this is an inherently wicked problem. We never know why, or even today, we don't know why traffic jams appear. Obviously, it's always the guy in the front until we are in the front, then it's someone else. But this is there are so many factors that play into this that we are not capable to apply standard engineering to solve these problems or even understand them. And this is the important part, because people also told me, you know what, Tom, I simply cannot go to 1,000 employees to like look at their home office and see how they're secure there, what is their IT equipment in their home office, etc. And I said, yes, this is right. And this is what it makes so wicked. We are not capable to do this. So we somehow need a new way of thinking how we can address these problems, how we can really say, okay, this is a complicated problem. For example, setting up a SOC, a security operations center. This is complicated. It's not easy, but yes, we know there are certain processes, technologies. We need an endpoint detection. We need a security information and event management system. These things, I can get a consultant and we can set it up together. Talking about the security and the awareness of your people when they're all dispersed all over the place in their home offices, this is an inherently wicked problem. And just think about it, like the whole field of strategy, of innovation is inherently wicked. No one could have foreseen 9/11 or the pandemic. I mean, just think about it. Last year, January, no one was able to think about a pandemic of that scale happening or unfolding. So these wicked problems are already there, and we are not really good at coping with them or even admitting that they are there. So I hope I got you a bit curious, because I would like to give you now a bit of an insight. How can we tame wicked problems through human-centered design, or how these two things align together? Because we have seen, just as a recap, socio-technical system design scientifically tells us for the last 80 years that we have to incorporate social needs and the technology that we have at hand. And the result, because it is so complex, so wicked, that we need a new approach. And this is where human-centered design actually can help us. And I would like to now give you an introduction to human-centered design, what this is about. Human-centered design is about developing something or coming up with innovations that are technically feasible, business viable, but first and foremost, human desirable. And this is actually our goal. This is what we want to achieve. And so this is not about we fully ignore technology advances over the last couple of years. This is not true. We still need technical experts. Obviously, we have the business context, which just adds to the wickedness. We all have budget constraints. We have resource challenges because we simply don't have enough people. And obviously, yeah, we see the human desirability. A good example for this is, for example, is shadow IT. I think most of you who come from an IT background or security, know this problem. The ubiquitousness of technology over the last couple of years really drove that. It's so easy now to set up, go and take the company credit card, set up your own cloud server, buy a few smartphones, and all of a sudden you have a completely isolated IT department outside of everything you could ever monitor. All the fancy salespeople who tell you about this endpoint detection, it is only applicable to what you see. But today there's a lot of things you don't see. And if you don't pay attention to it, if you don't contribute to the fact that this happens, you really suffer under this shadow IT thing. And also, what I can say about my research project, while it's still ongoing, I interviewed a bunch of different people and organizations all across Europe, from the military to United Nations offices. And what we see is, for example, when your boss is telling you, you are a sales guy, you have to make your numbers, I do not care how. In a situation full of stress, as the pandemic, you just went to home office, you work remotely, everyone works remotely, it's chaos. People will ignore your security guidelines because of the social aspect. They're scared to lose their job. Everyone is just reorienting. This was like a focal point on the social aspects. And it really, like, everyone now came up with Zoom, with Teams. It doesn't matter if your company says, no, we don't allow Zoom. People use it anyway. And I can tell you this, so far, 100% of the organizations I researched had shadow IT, while 100% of these organizations also had awareness trainings. And almost every security manager I interviewed acknowledged that they have these problems, but they simply tend to ignore it because they don't know how to deal with these wicked problems. So this is where we can leverage human-centered design to really shape something that meets these three goals. And the most important thing is, the most important capability or feature when people ask me, literally is not reverse engineering or anything. It is about empathy. Seriously, this is like the most important skill for me as a CISO. It was the most important skill in the last 10 years being a consultant. You don't design solutions for yourself. You design the solutions for your team, for your organization, or even the society. You really have to think about this. If I design something in my fancy office, I have to keep in mind my people, they are electrical technicians. They're somewhere out there in the field, somewhere in the mud, 5 meters below the ground, in a hole, laying electricity cables. This is a completely different environment. And I have to understand that, I have to see that, and I have to be empathetic for their needs. It doesn't do any good if I say, well, this is how it has to be done. No, I need to go out there, spend half a day with them in the field to literally see the struggles they are facing. And this is really what human-centered design is about, to say, okay, well, this is what they need. How can I use technology to secure these environments, given the business options I have, the limited resources, the budget constraints, but also legal aspects. I have to apply to comply with our data privacy laws, for example. So human-centered design can be, first of all, a mindset. This is what I was talking about right now. To achieve these three things, you don't need a fancy certification, or you don't need a fancy process or another software. It really starts with the mindset itself, to really make yourself aware that we need those things when we design solutions. The second thing is human-centered design as a process. And this is, I would say, what most people know, and unfortunately, what today is mostly done wrong. Human-centered design as the pure design thinking process. I'm pretty sure many people heard of design thinking, and I'm sure also a lot of you have been to design thinking workshops and you have been trained. There's a consulting company. Everyone simply learns how to pull off a post-it, and that's most of the things people tell you about. So this itself, it's nice. It's a nice process, but this is nothing without the right mindset. Also, when it comes back to the organization, you cannot simply say, I do a 2-day training in design thinking, and now I'm just all done. And this is like the silver bullet that will solve our problems. Unfortunately, the sales was very good at selling it like this, but they completely missed the point. Obviously, one reason is talking about mindset, talking about empathy is something we are not very good at in our work life today. We don't acknowledge that there are people out there. I don't have users. I have people, and they have feelings, and they have stress, and they might have trouble. And if your son has to go to the hospital, obviously, this is a completely different thing than, yeah, you're just an employee, you're just a user. If we continue to ignore these facts, we're just lost. And then the whole design thinking doesn't work. And the last thing is also human-centered design as a tool set. This is what most people learn in these design thinking workshops, like the tools. And this is, I would say, one of the most interesting facts that people, when we look at these 3 things, people always say, well, human-centered design or design thinking, it has to be this very specific process. And I want to now tell you a little bit like how wrong is that, and how you can actually adapt and leverage from this in a much easier and more applicable way. Starting with the mindsets. So these are the typical design thinking or human-centered design mindsets as they have been once drafted by the Stanford Do School. The Do School is a joint venture of Stanford and the Hasso-Plattner Institute, where actually design thinking, was born and became known from. And this is also the HPI, the Hasso-Plattner Institute, where I'm doing my research. The mindsets are something that each and every one of us can easily adopt right away. We can focus on human values. As I said, these are not users, they're people and humans we are talking to. We should much more often adopt this show and don't tell approach. When I do awareness or when I talk to people, I don't simply go there and say, this is 20 pages of a Word document with a policy. I do life hackings. We just look at how does malware spreads through a Word document. This is not about the latest red teaming, pen testing, fancy stuff. It's really about showing people what can happen in the world of security, why it needs to be done, etc. This also is very important when you roll out a new feature. Think about, these are humans. They might not have the same background as you do. They might not have the same knowledge about technology as you do. And we should also craft on clarity. So we should be really clear on like, this is what we are trying to achieve and what we are trying to achieve together. On the experimentation part, that's also something that's very challenging today. Wicked problems are really, I try something, I get the feedback, and I might have to redo it again. And this room for playing, for experiencing that we have in these design thinking workshops, this is something that we should adopt in organizations today. So many organizations, also when I did the design thinking workshops for my clients back then, is that why are not we innovative? We must have the wrong people and we might not have the right process, etc. No, it's your organization. You should simply give the room to the people so they can experiment. This is nothing wrong. Innovation doesn't happen every Friday between 3 and 4 p.m. This is not how it works. And this also comes with the bias towards action. Instead of just sitting there passively, when you experiment, when you go out, enforce or just embrace the action. Let people do something instead of just talking and having another meeting. we had design thinking workshops where we talked about virtual meeting experience, and we literally used from the typical Lego serious play to whiteboards where we draw all over the place. We really created some physical space, and it was a playful experience, and this really creates this creativity. And the radical collaboration is one of my favorites as well. Right now, when we have security projects, we have the security experts, the IT department together, but we barely see anyone from the field being part of these workshops. When I did, or when I worked on awareness trainings as a consultant, it was only the security department who sat there. And I was like, well, where do we have anyone from the people who are actually affected? Oh, no, because we know we designed it the way we wanted. This doesn't work. You can get so much insights and you get so much information and valuable feedback from the people. And this is something I really do. I just say, well, I talk about security, but I invite people from all over my organizations, bring them together. And I can tell you, this is something, the easiest that can be done. They're very grateful. They're like, well, finally, someone is asking for my opinion. Finally, someone is asking me for my input. This is something that doesn't cost a lot, but it can be so much gained. And the final one is be mindful of the process, which means if you're in the design thinking process, if you really want to structure it a bit more, it really makes sense to be aware how the process works and that you somehow stick to it. And with this, I would like to go over to the final part to give you a bit more of a concrete example of how this process of human-centered design or design thinking can look like. Again, this is just an introduction. This is not a final thing. And despite some salespeople might tell you, this is not about, this is the way you have to do it. If you don't do it like this, then you're not doing it right. This is just nonsense. Adapt it to your needs. But this process, I think, is a really good explanation to give some sort of orientation in the process. As I said before, right now, we start with the problem. Yes, this is our problem. This is our solution. We know that we are engineers, we are security, we are managers, we got that covered. And then people are like, yeah, but Tom, we are doing agile now and we are cool. Yeah, do the fancy agile stuff. But again, this means you are assuming you know the problem. And most of these agile problems fail exactly like this because the mindset in the organization fails. Like, oh, should they be really allowed to get their own work? Can they really be trusted to organize themselves? So let's forget about all that. The important part of addressing a wicked problem, whether it's a strategy, whether it's innovation in general, or security, it is we start with the problem. In the first phase, which we call the problem space, we first try to really get a lot of information. We try to discover as much as we can about the problem at hand. And only then we try to distill it and converge back, and we try to define the problem that we're actually solving, which can be quite interesting. Just afterwards, go to your organization and ask two people at the reception desk, at the HR, at the marketing, and say, well, if we talk about awareness, what is the problem? Is it really that you don't understand it? Is it really that you don't know how to securely operate IT? Or is the problem that you don't have time, that you're missing the right tools, that your boss doesn't want you to follow certain things? So the first part is really about doing the right thing. It's really about just gaining this insights, doing interviews with people, doing so-called journey mappings, etc., to really come to this point of view. How might we help our people with this specific problem? And only then we go to the so-called solution space, where we have a similar setup where we say, well, we are first developing, we're experimenting, we try a lot of new stuff, crazy things. I don't know, we craft something, whether it's Lego, whether it's your whiteboard, whether, I don't know, whatever, you just experiment and come up with as many ideas as possible. And then you come back to say, okay, this is, with all the experimentation we have done, there's this one thing that might actually address our problem. And this is about doing things right. And this is not a linear process. This is not about, yeah, that's easy, it's these few steps. Something that like almost physically hurts people when we do these things is also, well, we can always jump in between. We can say, well, maybe even when we are at the last stage of the delivery, we might make a new discovery that says, well, we have been working on the wrong problem. We have to go back to square one. We have to get away from this linearity, even in Scrum, when we see like, this is literally going from A to B. This is not what we are talking about today here. It's really about trying something, embrace the failure. If it doesn't work, it's okay. No one will get laid off. And this is just a good orientation, this process to really think about, okay, what can we do to first understand the problem before we go over to actually address the problem and work towards the solution. And this is also the last thing I would like to show you. It is the beginning of a solution. Many consultants, many teams just tell you, oh, if you do design thinking, the outcome is a final product. This is the 100% solution. This is all good. And then people get disappointed why this doesn't work. No, the outcome of such a process, it's the beginning of a solution. It's like, okay, now we have something and now we can redefine it. We can build now our first MVP, our first minimum viable product. We can now apply our agile works just after that, just behind that. So it's really a shift in the mindset. We have to spend more time on understanding, experimenting, and trying out. And then we can finally have something that goes into the right direction. So as a summary, I would like to tell you, human-centered design and design thinking in particular, it is not a magical solution to everything. This is just a wrong perception and this gets you in a wrong direction. But it helps to address these wicked problems. It can help you to really gain a deep understanding for your organizations, for your teams. If you talk about the firewall assessment, you don't need design thinking. You need a good engineer. If you talk about the red teaming exercise, it is not about design thinking. If you think about how do we design access controls for our building because we are annoyed or aware of people piggybacking into the building, then we need something like design thinking. People might simply be shy and not talk to people and say, oh, can I see your badge first before? This only works on paper. And this doesn't work if just engineers stick their heads together. This really needs to be addressed together with these people. So just to remember, it is not about technology. It's about our determination and creativity. It's about us to really shape and create human-centered design. It is about us that we give people the room, the space to actually experience this. And as a final example, before I'm done, this is our fancy security operations center here. But just bear in mind, this is the infrastructure, or was the infrastructure of the Emotet ransomware gang, where they had about 1.5 million victims and cost hundreds of millions of dollars in ransom. This was just like this open desktop PCs from, I don't know, 20 years ago. They have been creatively using technology to get to their point. So this was a very high level introduction to social science, to the science of organizations, to wicked problems as different to complicated problems, and to human-centered design as a way to address this. If you now say also, man, Tom, it's nice that we've seen the process, but what can we do about it? In the end of the presentation, and I will just briefly switch over here, which you will get afterwards. I have put you a bunch of links where you can literally take these tools. And please remember, it is about a mindset and it is about a tool set. You don't necessarily have to go through this whole design thinking process. Take what works for you, adapt it and use it. You don't have to always have to like follow the stringent process. And finally, I put also a few books recommendation here where I highly suggest if you're interested in the topic, definitely. The first two are very interesting. This is just a few pages publicly available if you're interested in this. Obviously, you can also reach out to me if you're interested. You can reach me through email, Twitter, Threema. I got my LinkedIn here. And with this, I would like to come to the final part. I want to say thank you. 50 minutes, quite on time. Yeah, I hope you liked it. I hope it was a bit of a different view. And I would like to open now and ask me anything round.
Tom, thank you very much. It was a really very insightful and excellent presentation. But I have a lot of questions for you. We have limited time. Let's start from the first question. First question is about security by design. You talk human-centric design, human-centric security. How can you embed human-centric design or security in your process design or program design or application design? We see that many of the time management doesn't invite experts on the table once they develop a program or process or applications. Where do you see this problem, or what's your solution for this or advice?
This is actually a pretty good point. Usually you start with a problem definition, and you don't do the design thinking just out there in the blue. You really say, okay, as I said, for example, oh, we have the problem of people entering our building, piggybacking, sneaking in through the doors. This is now my security related problem. How can I address that? And then working with the people to really understand, oh, okay, it is not that people don't know they should not allow people entering the building with them. It is about, well, I'm shy, and we have to give people the trust that they can speak up openly, say, well, this is simply because I'm too shy to tell people you're not allowed to come with me. Or if we say, I have to design something for our HR department when it comes to social engineering and spear phishing, well, of course, I can do a standard training, or I apply a human-centered design process. I sit down with our HR department and say, look, this is the threat, but your job is you get emails from unknown persons, you always have an attachment, and your job is to open it. If my security policy is now, you simply don't open it, your boss will tell you, just forget it, because our job is to open these documents. So this is like where you define the initial question on security, what is the security control we have to design? And then you just start the whole process and say, now we can start with the problem space and the solution space. Maybe just a very brief example. I did this for an NGO, and they had the CFO fraud problem. And there was a small NGO, no money, no resources. And they say, how can we prevent this? What we found out in the end, it's not they don't need more technology. They need a way to rely on the authenticity. Every Monday morning, they had a web call. And I said, well, okay, let's do it like this. Every Monday morning, you guys write down a word on the whiteboard, like butterfly or window. And in this week, you always sign internal emails with this specific code word. And this was a very easy solution. No money invested, no fancy technology like PGP, etc. But this is the core of human-centered design, for example, addressing spearfishing.
Great. Tom, you said that there are a lot of IT resources for the companies, and people should be trained how to use the IT resources securely. And let's imagine that a standard SME or CAUB in Switzerland, they have more than 10, 15, sometimes 500 different IT resources. Do you think that it is visible or economically profitable to train all the employees to use all the 500 IT resources?
No, and I think now we're coming back to the wicked problem. And there would be more science to this called complex adaptive system theory. I just skipped it out. No, we have to get away from the thinking that engineers have. We can solve the problem once and for all. This is simply not true. We will waste our endless energy on solving something that is not solvable. I really would do this piece by piece and say, okay, I do a risk analysis. What is my most important system? What type of security controls do I have to mitigate the risk? And then say, okay, how do I design this specifically? For example, I have to do ISO 27001. This is a given thing. This is a business reason. But the way I design, for example, the access management, this is something where I can ask and talk to my people. And so this is really how this works together. It's not about abandoning everything we have, but it's really about acknowledging the wickedness of the problems and the process we literally designed.
Thank you, Tom. And when we look at the organizational structure of the standard organization, we see board, we see management, C-level management, finance department, procurement, security, legal, compliance, sales, marketing. Who should be trained first? Do you think that the board should be trained first to understand the real threats and the real risks they have?
It's a good question. We are now focusing again on training. It's a question whether we talk about, again, designing the security for the organization or training the people on the organization. That's quite differently.
Which one should come first? Try a design, a security design, or first train the people?
I think it's hard and depends on if you say, well, you have a high bar on the security because you have everything from SOC, CERT, CCERT, then you can start with the training. And for that, I would literally do a workshop where I say, well, I need the head of HR, I need the lady at the reception desk, and I need our lawyer. And then come together. It is up to them to talk together. Again, this is not my decision because I don't see in their minds. This is again something like say, okay, well, yeah, it might make sense to start with our people. And then again, I should ask these people and invite them to the process. If I do a workshop, as I did recently, it is not me and the tech guys. It is literally me and 4 people from the business and saying, oh, okay, this is what you need. Okay, this gains so much understanding of the different views. So it is really about, are we talking about the design or the training? But again, for the training, it is a wicked problem in its own. I would really start and define like, what is the problem? Is the problem really a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding, or is it something different? Because most people assume we need a training, but sometimes it's like, no, the controls we have are simply not fit for purpose.
But don't you think that if we don't train, or if the board or management of the company, they get training, if they don't know the real threat to their company's risks, they will not invest in training, at least they will not invest in security.
Totally understand, totally align with you. And it's not like we do either or, it's a combination. And I did it as well. And for example, also the mindset show, don't tell. What I did, I actually prepared some sort of life hacking for our board and looks at like, look, obviously in a very high level, but I was like, look, this is the threat we are currently facing. We need to take actions. So I think even if we talk to the board to create this understanding, we can adopt the mindset, because also they're like about finance, they're about business development. They have a completely different view, but it's important to incorporate that.
Great. Tom, you are a CISO and DP of a critical infrastructure company in Switzerland. Do you think that every single SME or organization, they have to hire CISO and a DPO? Is it a solution?
I don't think so, because I think it will be too much. There are not enough CISOs out there. And this is coming back to the genuinity of design thinking. You can literally shape your own organization and say, well, how can we actually achieve security in our organization? Do we need to hire an external? Do we even have the resources to do so? Because security is a threat to everyone. Social engineering, spear phishing, ransomware, and they have to do something. But I cannot go to everyone and say, you need an ISO 27001 certification. You need to have a SOC, you have to have a CERT, and you have to have a CCERT. And in the end, your SME has like 5 times the organization is just doing security, and only like a 5th is doing the business itself. This simply doesn't work. And this is why it is so important to understand it is individual to the people, to the organization.
Yeah, I think I have still a lot of questions, but we are almost on the time. But I have last question, which is very interesting to our audience as well. Where do you see this Switzerland in 5 years, the best scenario and the worst scenario? General overview in cybersecurity for our community, for our nation.
Well, I really hope that we are progressing in that field. And I generally think we need a bit more of regulation in here. Switzerland is currently, if you look at my part, Germany is much more advanced. They say, well, we simply enforce it, because this comes back to the board. There needs to be some sort of pressure to really say, well, security is to be taken serious. Many today know about security and everyone has it on the agenda, but when it comes to put the money where your mouth is, many organizations shy away. And I hope that we can really work together on that, that we can also have formats like the Swiss Cyber Forum, like you guys, that we really bring people together, that we learn from each other. This is not about business concurrency. It is about working together, because one of us can never solve this issue. We really need to work together and have a collaborative effort on the best end. The worst end is we're just becoming this surveillance dystopia where we just see, the government taking the wrong turns, and technology is mainly abused also in a societal context, while organizations are simply doing as they did. They are aware, they maybe sign an insurance, but they don't really address the problem. And then I think the whole situation will escalate even for Switzerland.
Yeah, hopefully that it will go well for Switzerland. We will have better situation in the future, better than today. And Tom, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation, your time, and insightful information. We enjoyed it. The session is recorded and it will be available to all our visitors at Swiss Cyber Expo. And we are pleased to have you in the future again as a speaker, if you have time.
Of course. Thank you, Samir. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks to the audience. And as I said, feel free to reach out to me, and looking forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much, our audience. You watched us on Swiss Cyber Expo, and we see you after 2 weeks. Bye-bye.